Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Studying Law Around the World. Today, I have the honor to welcome Gina Alexandris to join us and to share a little bit about her personal journey in law and to share with us also about the work that she does these days, helping internationally trained lawyers and lawyers in general with clarity in their careers. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gina.
It is such a pleasure to be here, Claudio. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And
Mm.
to start our meeting today, our podcast, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. Would you be able to tell us about yourself and your career?
Absolutely. I start off by saying two things. One is that my childhood as a child of immigrant parents has impacted me in ways that I don't think I appreciated when I was growing up and as I was even a young adult. And the second thing is that I have had opportunities that did not exist when I was in law school and when I graduated from law school. And so I always remind people that, first of all, to think about what is important to you. And second of all, to understand that there are pathways ahead of you that you may not realize. So, with that in mind, start off wanting to be a teacher, but then because of a circumstance that happened to my parents with a legal matter, I realized that they didn't have access to a lot of legal representation. And I switched from wanting to go into teaching to wanting to go into law as a result. Went to law school, graduated, and worked in a small Toronto firm practicing civil and family litigation, and enjoyed a lot of elements of it over a period of about 4 years. But as I'll discuss later on, something else kept drawing me. And remember what I said about going back to sort of things that are of importance to you. Through a variety of ways, I found my way to a new role that was opening up at Osgoode Hall Law School to start the career development office. And it seemed to be the right place at the right time and the right opportunity, and took that role, not having a clue what it meant to be part of a career development office, because at that time we didn't have them in Canadian law schools. Worked there and really found a great fit for me, and worked there for about 3 years before the opportunity to become assistant dean of the law school came up. And I remember, Claudio, and I use this example for many, thinking, I'm not ready for this. This is a leap role or a stretch role. How can I possibly even think about it at this stage? It's too soon. But then a little voice in me said, yeah, but the next person who does it might be there for a long while and you might lose this opportunity. Why not try? And so, with that and a lot of support and encouragement from people that I knew and loved and trusted, I put my hand in for that and got the role. And I was the person who kept the role for the next 9 years. And it was a fabulous opportunity to engage with the legal community, students, faculty in ways that I had not even anticipated before. And fast forward a total of 12 years at Osgoode, the University of Toronto Faculty of Law had gotten funding from the province to start something called the Internationally Trained Lawyers Program. We had a few ITLs who were coming in through the NCA applicant process at Osgoode, but there were very few other resources at the time for internationally trained lawyers. And again, change is hard. Going to the competing law school, quote unquote, even though we had a lot of collaboration, was hard. Osgoode had been my alma mater, but I decided, let me try it, let me do it. Went to the ITLP and started the Internationally Trained Lawyers Program with a group of phenomenal colleagues, and really started seeing what the world of ITLs is like. And I go back to, as a kid of immigrants, many experiences that they were facing were still very similar, although there were some that were very different. Was really, really happy to be part of that world and to understand, to be able to offer things to ITLs that had not been available, including community before. And what I saw from that point was that a number of different programs started coming up after that at the U of T, at Osgoode, across Canada. Programs that were formal programs, informal programs, and it was that voice was starting to get louder, and I was really, really happy about that. Somewhere along the lines, in about 3 or 4 years that I was at the ITLP, the Ministry of the Attorney General came calling and said, we need somebody to do some of our strategy and professional development for our lawyers. Would you come? And I thought, this is a group, public service, that I had not worked with before, and I knew what private practice was like. I wanted to do that. I made this shift and did it, and was really blessed to meet a number of bright, talented, giving individuals, and discovered what the OPS, the Ontario Public Service, has to offer for lawyers that I hadn't appreciated before. But then fast forward, the opportunity to start yet another program at the third university in Toronto, then Ryerson, now TMU, came up. They had gotten the approval to launch the English version of the law practice program, and that that pull to start something new, to support people who otherwise were finding challenges just was too strong. Made the leap and spent about close to 9 years with the university with the law practice program, and also starting and helping to develop their new law school, which was a phenomenal experience. So again, if you had asked me at graduation what would I be doing, I would have told you civil and family litigation forever and ever. Never even, because each of those roles that I mentioned were brand new, did not even exist. And then I had, while at U of T, I had started my coach training, and it was time about 2.5 years ago for me to pursue that full time, and made the difficult but easy decision to again switch and move into the entrepreneurial role, which I'm in now, which is supporting lawyers and law students and other professionals as they navigate leadership transitions, changes generally, and watch their successes. So that's in a nutshell.
That's amazing. I feel like not a lot of professionals have had the exposure you had to this whole world of internationally trained lawyers, programming development, and the legal field itself. So it's just fantastic to hear about your story. And I feel like there is a common thread connecting all of these career choices. I think I mentioned it before in a few podcasts, and there's this graduation speech by Steve Jobs where he talks about connecting the dots when you look backward and all of that. And I'd love to know, after holding such like a wide range of roles across leadership, law, education, what would you say that connects these points in your career over the years?
It's interesting because, believe it or not, this was when I was thinking about leaving law, or not sure what I wanted to do while I was in practice. Something felt off, but I wasn't quite sure I could identify what it was. And I went to a then career psychologist. We didn't have coaches necessarily at that time. And one of the first exercises she asked me to do was do a quote unquote life map to see sort of what were the highs and the lows, and sort of that I experienced up until that point, and to help connect the dots. So that exercise is a phenomenal exercise for all of us to do at different stages. The first one certainly came up at that time and has been consistent, and that's the idea of personal and professional development, growth. My father was an individual who had a grade 3 education, and yet really craved and really encouraged learning. And I think I've taken that on in ways that I had not necessarily appreciated. But my own and others' personal and professional development is something that is a critical theme and a critical dot throughout all of the roles that I've had, and personally. But what I've discovered, and this I think I discovered during my coach training, the second theme, or the second connecting dot, is celebration and celebrating people's journeys. Remind people of the celebrations, as you're doing with a lot of people, and for people who aren't even in the profession yet, being able to hold a mirror and spotlight and celebrate others has been what I enjoy doing. My favorite part of my role at Osgoode and at the ITLP and the LPP were the convocations at Osgoode and the calls to the bar ceremony. I had the benefit and the privilege of being on stage for the calls to the bar ceremony. Those moments, those hours, those celebrations sort of just highlight for me being able to say, you've got this, you've got this milestone, there's more to go, but you'll be celebrated then as well. And even being there in my coaching practice for the celebrations, small or large, that clients find themselves a new job, a new understanding, a new philosophy, a change that they were looking forward to. I think it's important for each of us to be able to do it individually, but then to have somebody champion us in that way, I think is also important. And I enjoy that role. So the professional and personal development and the celebration, or a championing of people's successes, I think are the two common links in everything that I have done today.
How has your idea of career success changed over time?
I think, Claudio, that one of the biggest ways it's changed for me is taking it more from an outward reflection. What do other people want me to do? What do other people think I'm good at? What do other people define as success? How do other people view success, to more of an inward reflection? And how do I define success? What do I want? What does it look like to me? And understanding and appreciating success looks so different for each and every person. And to appreciate and to celebrate our own definition of success. I can tell you that the pull towards other people's goals and other people's definitions is so very strong. especially in a profession like law. It starts almost from the first day of law school. I'll say it also starts from before we even get to law school. I think good intentions on our schools. I was part of this whole process where we want to see people see themselves in leadership roles, but there's many ways of defining leadership. There's many ways of defining successes. And I think when you're able to sift through the noise and when you're able to actually think through what it is that you really want, what's important to you, you can define success in the way that you want to. And so I think that that shift for me more, and it came, and I'll tell you this, I hadn't really made the connection until just now. When I was transitioning from the practice of law to my new job at Osgoode, which again, nobody knew what a career development was or a career development officer. I had no clue how to explain it to people. Yet there was something there that was telling me it's in law, it's in legal education, it's helping people, and it felt right at the time. But I remember my biggest, you've seen, and I'm sure others who might be watching know how close I was to my parents and how remarkably impactful they were. I remember being really nervous and ambivalent of telling my father that I was not going to be a lawyer anymore, that identity that people have. It's easy to define what a lawyer is. And I still remember the time when I was telling him and nervous that he'd be disappointed, upset, fill in whatever word that might be applicable for you, because I had his definition, the successful lawyer, the successful advocate, the daughter who went on to go to law school that when nobody else had. My dad was a very practical man, and I remember telling him very nervous, and his response, he looked at me and he said, "Are you going to be happy?" And I said, "Yeah, Daddy, actually, I think I will." And he said, "Good. I'm very glad. Then do what you do really well and be happy with it, and I'll be very happy for you." And all of a sudden, I thought, this man's definition of success is not what I had thought it was. It was a very different success definition, and it allowed me then to free myself from outside definitions and start really thinking about what my own definition was.
That's fantastic. It's always inspiring to hear that and to have that family support. At times people have asked, how do you keep up with doing the LLM and keeping these side projects, doing a podcast, part-time work, and this and that. And honestly, without that family help, it wouldn't be the case for me. So I feel very, very privileged to have that support. And it's amazing to hear how you've got to experience that too. And thinking about your trajectory and the things that you shared so far, you've worked closely with a lot of internationally trained lawyers for many years. And I was wondering, what are some of the most common challenges that you would see they facing when entering the legal market? And also, if I may ask, adding to that question, how have you seen it changing over time from when you started to what you see with your clients now?
Really great question. And as you know, just before we have taped this, I have sort of been immersed in ITLs, the ITL conference in Calgary. Next year, they're planning on having it here in Toronto. So just a word of encouragement to ITLs to think about joining next year. That thought really came up for me, that your second thought, especially in terms of what's changed and what's still the same, because there's a lot that's still the same, but there have been changes. And in terms of access to information, I'll say the following. There used to be few resources and few points of information, and now there is so much. And on the one hand, I am so glad that there are more resources available for ITLs. What I'm hearing, though, is that people are so overwhelmed with data and information, sometimes they just don't know how to start and how to access it. So while it's there, it's the challenge of accessing it. So the growth of data and information is really wonderful. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. There's still stigma about ITLs, although it's lessened. With more and more ITLs speaking and supporting one another, with more champions of ITLs being vocal, the stigma has lessened, but it's still there. And I think being able to A, understand that it's there, and B, work towards and find your supports to be able to overcome that, I think is really, really critical. You mentioned the networks and community support or family support. So while you and I may have talked about families, one of the challenges for a lot of ITLs is that they don't have, and I don't know how many people I've spoken to who've said, I've got to do everything on my own because I don't have family around. I don't have, many times, I don't have even friends. They've come completely not knowing anybody around. And that lack of personal and let alone professional networks or relationships or communities is really challenging. And what I found is these groups. So the change is that these groups, whether it's the ITL network, whether it's an LLM, these groups allow people to have the community that I felt was so important when we started the ITLP at the University of Toronto. It's that community of other people who are in the same boat and get you, understand that you're juggling immigration challenges with figuring out your next job, with getting that training that you need, with looking for daycare for your child. We had new babies born in each of the programs, and then individuals who were trying to juggle new parenthood with all of that. It's the figuring out how to cope with illness with people back home who you are so far from and yet so dearly love. So community building here, I think, is really a challenge, but also something that I've seen change. And one thing that I will say continues to be a challenge and always has been is access to that very first job. I think the other elements, the access to information, the stigma, the community, all help with access to that first legal job, but that continues to be throughout the conference and throughout people when I have conversations with people, that tends to be one of the first challenges.
I see. Fantastic. And it seems like for that first opportunity, that's the one that hasn't changed a whole lot then through the years. Very interesting. So you've talked about, building careers with purpose and all of that, and mentioned now these struggles. So what are some ways that internationally trained lawyers can stay focused on their purpose when they're navigating so many transitions? And I say that thinking about there's so much to consider here, but at times and I catch myself talking about this with colleagues as well, where at this point many people have a bit more clarity in their careers. They've gone through, the undergrad. Many of us did have some legal experience before starting this career here in Canada, and then it seems like maybe an area of law is really open to receiving people, and that you can more easily find an articling position in that area of law, but you really don't, match that area. And then what do you do? Do you just, take it so that you can get licensed? Or, so there's so many reflections to make about that. And I'd love to pick your brain a little bit and hear your thoughts on that.
Claudia, you've hit on sort of a constant conversation that I have with ITLs, the balancing act, right? That has to take place. But also, and you use the word, and I'm so glad that you did, the reflection and the self-reflection that we need to be doing regularly. And sometimes people will say to me, I have no time to self-reflect, or I have no time to, or energy to have the privilege of thinking through what I want. I just need to get things done. I need to get a job. I need to put food on the table. And I always ask them just to pause because it's so really important. I realize that there's a privilege in being able to self-reflect, but I think there's a danger if you don't take that time and energy and space to allow yourself to think about what's really important to you. And it could be that what's really important to you at this time may be a little bit different than what was important to you 5 years ago or 2 years ago, and what might be important to you 6 or 7 years down the road for that matter. So thinking about what's important to you at this very time is critical. And typically, some of those values, some of those priorities will be the same, regardless of circumstances around us. So if you think, for example, that time spent with family is important, or if you think that being a subject expert in a particular, just being a subject expert is important, or if you have a particular interest in an enthusiasm for a particular area of law, intellectual property or family law, or if you think that right now priority is money and you need financial stability because that's been something that you are craving and have not been able to establish. Each of those is a legitimate goal to have. Each of those is a legitimate value to have. Again, it goes back to the inward versus the outward. Don't second guess yourself on what your classmate is doing or what Claudio is saying he's doing or what Gina is saying she's doing. Thinking about what's important to you at any given time is really, really important. And, many people say, well, our parents or whoever other immigrants were thinking about didn't have the luxury of thinking about these things. And I say, I bet you they did. They just didn't formalize it or just didn't think about doing it. But I'm sure that when they were looking for a first job, they may have been thinking, right now, I don't have the luxury of financial stability. I need that. Or right now, I do. My circumstances are such. Let me think about what I can look at. So self reflection, I think, on your values is important. What matters to you most in any particular given time? Speak to someone about it, a good friend, a trusted colleague, a coach, an instructor, people, a peer that you're meeting, but don't necessarily just go with what they say. Speak about it to get information, to hear your own thoughts out loud. Because when we speak about things in our head, Claudio, it's a jumble sometimes. We have to speak it through and speak it out. And I always say two other things. Maybe give yourself a visual reminder. If family is a priority, put a screenshot of family on your phone. If excitement or travel or journey is important or a priority, have a picture on your screen somewhere to remind you of what that is. If calm and stability or financial success is what is motivating you right now, again, what's that visual reminder? I also, and I don't know if you've ever done this. I can't remember in any of your posts if I've seen this, and if you have, my apologies. I sometimes get clients to do this, and I used to get our students to do this. Do a letter to your future self, reminding you in the future what is important to you right now. And whether with the wonder of technology, you can postmark it for 6 months down the road, for a year down the road, for 3 months for 3 years down the road. You can use the email send function to you. Hopefully you won't change emails or you'll look at the email. That will be a letter to yourself and a reminder of what's important to yourself. I think being able to talk through those issues on a regular basis with somebody that you trust and believe in, but also just to remind yourself of what's important today, helps when you're making decisions. And one of the exercises that I do with my coaching clients is we go through this values exercise where we talk through it. And then as during our coaching engagement, as opportunities come up, I always bring that back to people and say, remember when we had this value exercise, how does this particular job opportunity align with what's important? And then we have to make decisions. We're adults. And so sometimes, if it aligns with 8 out of 10 of our values, great. Sometimes we have to make decisions that even if right now this opportunity might not align with the majority of our values, we need to take it for other reasons. We're making an informed decision. And I think that's really critical. I'll give you a brief example. And again, I hadn't connected it until we had this conversation. When I was assistant dean, and I'd oftentimes get first year students or even sometimes second year students come into me, especially first year students in the first few months, who would be questioning their choice of coming to law school. Why did I decide to do it? I can't do it. I'm stuck. I'm not sure it's what I really want. And we had paper files in the early days. I would go back and pull out their admission letter or their application, their personal statement in their application. And without them knowing what I was doing, I would actually read out a portion of their personal statement. And so they were hearing out loud what they wrote anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 years earlier about why they wanted to go to law school. And I don't know how many times I'd get stunned looks with, who was that person? Oh, yeah, I forgot that that's what I want to do. And then a conversation would start. I still really want to do that. Or, that was what I wanted then, but I think I've changed and this is what I want to do. But it sort of reminded people of what was in their head at some point, and then they could think through why this was important at this point.
That's incredible. What a privilege for those that got the chance to have that done for them. That's so amazing. Going forward here with our conversation, and wow, so many good reflections you're bringing. Thank you so much. What kind of advice would you give then to internationally trained lawyers who are trying to balance these ideas of meeting the licensing requirements and trying to build a community and a network here in Canada that will, give that support that you just mentioned, that sometimes we have with family, we have with friends, and then, juggling all of these things at the same time. And then also, I guess that network may also, open job opportunities. So there's so much involved in the whole, system of different stakeholders involved.
There is so much. And this past weekend, the person who was being the MC for the conference was an Ontario ITL who I actually knew from the law practice program. But he was using a phrase when he would be thanking speakers or panelists or keynotes or whatnot. And he was using a phrase that I hadn't really heard before. And as given what I said earlier, it really resonated with me. But instead of saying, let's give them a round of applause, which is sort of the typical thing, or let's thank our guests or our speakers or our panelists, he would say, let's celebrate them. Join me in celebrating them. And I want to do the same for you, because I think what you are asking and what you are doing for the ITL community really is an incredible opportunity. And I want to celebrate you, and I want to celebrate all ITLs who may be listening. And I want to celebrate all of the profession who are giving ITLs that chance. And so that, in terms of the community building that you're asking me about, two things come up in particular. One is to remember that this process, as much as you want to get through it, as much as you want to run through it and finish because you've got to tick off everything on your checklist, right? We all have this mental checklist, done, 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 or still in progress. Just remember it's a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It is a long journey and it can take you longer than you had anticipated, and that's okay. It's not a sprint. Don't try and rush through it. You're going to miss so much if you try and rush through it. And the other part that I will say, which sort of takes that into account, is include relationship building as part of that process. When you think about, okay, first the accreditation process, then the NCA process, then the licensing process. And as part of the licensing process, exams or articling, then that first job after that. And then, of course, we compartmentalize all the other things that we have to do in our life personally, perhaps. And my comment on that is think about it all as one big journey, one big part of your journey. And if we think about networking or community building or relationship building as a separate, it's going to overwhelm us. Even with current lawyers who are thinking about business development, I have to get across to them, and their mindset has to change, that in fact, business development is just a part of the job. When they think about the practice of law, and I have to build a portfolio or I have to build a client list, when they think about it as separate, they're not going to give it the attention they need. When we see it as all part of the same process, there's more likelihood that we're going to do it. So dedicate, I often say, use it as one of your files. If you're in the process and you're going through exams or the LLM, think about the relationship building as one of your courses. It's one of, not a separate thing. It's a part of. And make the time, just as you're scheduling your research or your class time, schedule it. Put it in your calendar where you devote, and you can determine what's important, how much time you can do for it, doing some research about people you want to meet, sending out those emails, having the coffee chats, following up with them afterwards, attending events. Actually, allot yourself a time. And I know people are going to say, Gina, I've got 24 hours in a day. I need to sleep. I need to eat. I have my children or my part-time job. And my comment is, it doesn't have to be a lot at that stage. Can it be half an hour? What's the best use of that half hour? But actually have half an hour. We brush our teeth. We put on clothes. We sometimes cook. We take time to eat. Hopefully, we take time to eat, and we do take time to sleep. If we can think about this as one of those elements of our life that, and I find relationship building is just sort of a now woven into what I do, part of what I really enjoy. But it wasn't how I started off thinking about this. It was that extra thing I had to do. And if you tell me I have to do something, I don't really necessarily want to do it. But when it becomes something that is part of and actually quite beneficial, I think it's helpful. And the only other thing that I'll say on that is it's helpful when you're doing it in a way that is authentic and meaningful to you. So, I started off by public speaking and teaching, and that was, given what was important to me, that made it easier. I like people and I like celebrating other people, so attending events is okay. I know some people don't like doing that. So find the best way possible for you, but spend time actually dedicating to doing it. And you said, I think you used the word genuine part, right? And it's so true. If you're not genuine, if you're not coming across as genuine, it will be harmful to you and not harmful, but just not enjoyable for the other person. It's not about getting a job, Claudio, right? You've probably heard this before. It's really about learning about others, sharing about yourself, building relationships, and doing it in a way that feels really, I was going to say that feels really natural. Understanding that sometimes we do have to put ourselves up in those uncomfortable situations. Bring a buddy to an event. If you don't like going by yourself, do some research beforehand about who's going to be there. So there's somebody that somehow shares a connection that you do, the school that you went to, the area of practice. Maybe they talk about having a dog. Maybe they talk about liking to travel, and then use that as sort of an entry to speak to somebody. So don't treat it as a separate task. Really think about it as interwoven with part of being a professional. I'd say part of being a human is being part of the community. And take the long road. Think about the marathon that you're on, not just I got to get this done to cross it off my list.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for all of that. And to continue this reflection, and to those that would like to uh, get to learn more about your services and what kind of contact they could have with you, Gina, would you tell us a little more about the services you provide as a career coach and also how people could reach out to you.
Absolutely. So, what I've done since going sort of out on my own is maintain two different elements of my career coaching and consulting role. On the one hand, are my one on one coaching sessions with individuals, and I'll come to that in a second. But I also very much stay involved with organizations and doing either keynotes or workshops or projects with them. So whether it's the Hidden Gems project for the Law Society or whether I do workshops for certain organizations, firms, or the Civility project that I would encourage all ITLs to take a look at from the Toronto Lawyers Association. Those are sort of things that people can access as resources or attend as participants. The one-on-one coaching, and again, I love both. I get energy from the group material and the projects, and I also get energy from the one-on-one engagement. When you sit down with one person, drill down in terms of what's really important to them, and work through a plan, two things, a plan to how to get to that and a plan on, first of all, what it is and then how to get to that. And then working through some of the challenges. And oftentimes what we're doing are mock interviews, mock coffee chats. We're doing mock difficult conversations sometimes, like if you're in a particular role and you've got a challenging supervisor, a challenging colleague, a challenging client, let's talk through the conversations that you might have with them and how to better prepare yourself for it. So everything from, the resumes and interviews, even before we get there, what's important to you, the values, and working through a process. I'm starting to also talk to more senior lawyers who are into the next transition, which is whatever they want to call that retirement or that next phase or the reduction. And that's sort of a new area that I've started to engage with lawyers about as well, ITLs and locally trained lawyers as well. How can you reach me? There's probably three ways. One is through my website. I have a contact me there, ginaalexandris.com. My YouTube channel has a number of things. One, a couple of years ago, I started a book club, Career Conversations book club, and there's some fabulous authors with some fabulous books that they've written. And we have, 1 hour conversations with them. And if you're an ITL who is already in practice, or if you're not, but the ITLs who are in practice, each of those sessions is worth CPD hours for the LSO. So you can, a free resource to be able to mark off your CPD hours and learn something and have some fun conversations. And I also have a particular on that YouTube channel, which is Gina Alexandris Career Coach. If you type that in, or if you search Gina Alexandris Career Coach on YouTube, you'll be able to find me. There are a couple of sessions for ITLs. One is learning the legal landscape. Another is about your resume and cover letter. So there's some free resources there. And as you very well know, I'm very regularly on LinkedIn. I think it's an exceptional platform for us to build those networks. One of the things that was so gratifying over the last couple of days at this at this conference, was meeting people who I knew virtually through LinkedIn. One person, a professor at UCalgary, Gideon Christian, who I knew from LinkedIn for the past, I don't know, 10 years or so. We'd never met in person, and it was such a wonderful opportunity to meet in person. I'm on LinkedIn, and I do hope people reach out and connect. Those are sort of the three primary ways right now in doing so.
Amazing. And for those of you listening to this episode, you just look at the show descriptions down below and you'll see all of these links. I'm sure they are there. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Gina, for sharing these wonderful ideas, advice, and reflections with us today. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's episode. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Claudia. All the best. Bye bye now.